le tabu taba awete taba ko le protested pa pu tho da de me de ko bloody no lo ne awete ko lo da no pin ne kla ne bloody de ba wo a myo kla ne no okay lucky the khu ne particular baptist no ala particular baptist ne a khochi kho bo he ta le non separatist no le mo ga separatist o le lucky the pu ne the me separatist ba o le awete te pa ne o le London no awete ne tu lo we da le mo ga John Calvin no but there John Calvin ngi ja John Calvin theology ne awete tu lo we da blo hone ne awete ma portray we da John Calvin no so John Calvin ne theology kla ne to no ne mlu le ne ta khu than ne o ro ka do de no ta khu than ne a limit o we no ka mya ne ta la ta khu than ne kwa ta ga le ba ta khu tho tho ne ba ka te ri le ka ba o re a limit mo no ta me ta ba ta la kha ba blo ne a we te da ta do blo ne ta blo lo su ti kla no ta me ta blo lo sa ti kla ta blo lo su ti kla Padano no ni apuichi ni o mo ni ta no ba sa awete we la ta blo ni ba blo no ka la chikla ma ba he ke pa pla tho ke ni sa myo no ta bu ta ba ta tamli ni awe hi ba we ho ta ni particular baptist ni ba ni lu ko ma thwe da John Calvin ata ti ti ba ta no la me ta ti ba ni no leki aga ta pu he pa ro no awe te yo shi ni we da wa yu da pu amu bu mu wa yu da pu amu bu ni no wa yu da pu amu bu ni bla ho ni awe te ba ywa le mu fu ni no wa ko le 7-day baptist awe te ni awe te we da le ta le mu hu ni wa yu da pu mu o bui ni ne no me mu ni le ka sa ya he ta ble le awe te ka mu tho ba tho da go ho ni awe te ba ywa le mu hu ni de no phin ne ta ka tho hu ya ye si kha ne pa le blue pop portrait awe te a ki ti ba o ki pu le e click on no lucky kai ne wa ka nyo te ta ba gla sa mo ba le ba ywa le mu hu ni te ba wo lo mya de ho ko do be nya ne ra lo ta ta ku no ba sa tho le phin ne de sa tho phin ne awe te ta ko o ki pu le America ko sorry ko ugly ko no so da phin ne tu le khai ne pa su mo pa na pa she so da pa mi khi à pa o me wi lu ba mi khi ba no so okay lo mo ga ba te kha ne ba bla chi po te ta pha ne pa tho we da le ta mi the le ta lo ta ko bo ba no ta lo le ta to ne ta myo le ta to ta myo pa tho a myo klu lo de ta no ne ba te di le we te so mo lo ta le ke so pa ne du so bi so ba wa no wa la pa da ta pu du ma na ma ka ba ta ta ble to ba blo ne ta no ne hu we ta ta ble le ta bu ta ba ko blo ne he tu la America no le mo ka ba te le he tu la America a ge bo ne ba kwa se bo no
After trade and communication between Europe and the Americas began following Columbus's voyage in 1492, many Europeans began to seek opportunities in the New World. One such great
sa tho le to ka thon wi kya ble phin ne ta la Columbus ne awe hu wa la na hu Columbus a ge wa pa ma lo ba la Columbus wa la hu ti to ko to mo no Columbus wa po Columbus a ki no du lo phin ne awe te ero ku le ma ka ta awe ero ma le tho ma do ro ta ku le ma ka ma le tho ma do ro ta ti a da ti nya lo ne wa po Columbus a ki no du lo ba lu po ma thwe we di awe ma we to sha ti sha ko de no awe hu chi we ta lo a to ti ta pha lo ne awe ti ne phin ne a kla ne wa ta mi the wa ta phu ba ro de ne no ba a phu po awe a ki di to ro ka khu ti nya ho ko so
now known as the Pilgrims, sailed from England to North America in 1620. Some of them wanted to sail to America because they thought they could make money there. Some of them were looking for greater religious freedoms. They all thought that a new
so penny eglani atake ni no ni ero chachisha ko koplo le ero ma ato a business no adakule maka no ni we di sumo we dale be le tu le ti to ko to ni bo tu tho ba tabu taba kru kru di pataba patada we to no ta tabli ko o no ne di po le phe ya ba ti ho ta ni we ti head to le America
new life in a new land could give them what they were looking for. In the summer of 1620, a ship called the Mayflower, as well as a second ship called the Speedwell, set sail from England towards the Americas. Shortly after their journey began, however, the Speedwell sprang a leak, and they had to stop.
So, penny the kato kugia kissing in Mayflower Speedwell Gamoki Bay, where they sato hetola egalico, but where they get hesu American. No, the hesu America basan in the Kabo hato with the Hiba, let's Kabola at a beyond in the aware tea nuloma, no tea nulobla in the away ba auto, but auto little awake about walking it, huh?
To make repairs. They set sail again, but they had only traveled a few hundred miles from England when the Speedwell began leaking again, forcing both ships to return to Plymouth.
So penny when it led to a mila the the aware than in a two plug dollar, not two plug dollar on in the aware, Kabo Kibil and in the back when I saw Pilmer. No, look, Lomoka, look where they had such a head talkie a winner where they back when I penny.
By then it was September, and the Pilgrims decided to abandon the Speedwell. Some of the Speedwell's passengers moved on to the Mayflower, and some decided to stay in England.
So penny away to yon in he knew where at Tabatan, no, he knew where at Tabata gave a party to border be, no how on how on that. So what a non on the OT, likely go, what a non on in a lepot where Mayflower Gaboki did away. They gave a party now, but a lep a glesumena.
On September 6, 1620, the Mayflower set sail a third time for the Americas.
So last September, who thought to who ya kissing in it, or Mayflower in it, or hair talk, no hair talk, Kadotsu, America, I went in it, it's a blood.
Around 130 people were crammed onto the small Mayflower. About 100 were passengers, 70 adults, and 30 children. The rest.
So I went in it, what over I got to get the secret, no? Penny glan in it, what up one in the paragon we see in it, or Lagan put it put that. The Agata no on the Pala Marapula, Pamarapoti Pala Capomono.
Rest were the ship's crew. There were animals on board the Mayflower as well. Pigs, goats, chickens, and even some pet dogs. The ship was only 106 feet or 32 meters long and 25 feet or 7.5 meters wide, so the voyage was extremely crowded.
No, so kabon paganyon ini ane di kabon at lemo no at leblo ini at yon ini aku le gede le akra dawe aton ini at lewi.
When the weather was bad, the passengers had to stay below deck while the ship rocked and tilted in the waves. Many people were sick for the entire trip. 2 people died, and 1 baby was born while they crossed the ocean. For those who were well, it must have been a long and boring journey.
Penny Watikia, Coblo Tausu Clihuda, Calito, Tausu Clihuda Watikiga, they put that a gasam, Uplet or penny. No, he tell it in it to one. No, put that a gamma, Uplet or penny blonde in it. No, so me da bagate le da le ne da me da le le aphu ba da le ne da le kle ne w ni w to nya na w ni w la.
Some passengers read books or played card games. But by the time they arrived in the New World, they must have been very glad for the voyage to end. Land was sighted on November 9th, but there was a problem. They had landed too far north. The original destination of the Mayflower was supposed to be Virginia, but storms
So away te ne ni to kale to le America go ne ba he we da kwen la nya le last September ke yo ne to le la November. So kila ka nya no so away they had to ne had to we da le le mo ka we no no la Pennsylvania no Massachusetts ba sa ne away te kale no lo ne ka ba le phe no away te le to le ne ta poko no so away te le away te to pa ne phe ba sa le to le ta poko no
storms and rough seas had blown them off course, so they had landed at what is now Massachusetts. They tried to sail south, but by now the winter weather had made the seas stormy, and so they decided to
di away te to pa to away te ro le we da lo le ta po la ni ba sa na ke khop lo le kali mu ko kali so wo ko ne no away te le te ba ta ni ba ho ne ni ba lo ta le ke ta lo le pe he tu to ko da phe lo no ne ni la November the sea to ne ni away te te da le cake no ta lo pe ne ni away te o we da pe ne
day and anchored in the harbor at Cape Cod on November 11th. They looked around for a good place to settle, and by December they had moved to a place they named Plymouth.
so away te ha khu we da ta lo le away te ko nu ke te ke no pe ne ni away te chi we da ta lo to le away te hi we mi le Plymouth.
The first winter in the New World was a terrible one for the passengers of the Mayflower. They were not prepared for the cold weather.
So away te he tu ne la December so la December le Massachusetts ne ma da di le that clean no away te ne te nya no ta te nya le ba he tu pay du ne no ta clean du ne ba no ta ta di le ne te nya ba ta to chong mu no blo ho ne ta ke ko lo no so away te su ki we da do du ta
They did not have enough food. Terrible sicknesses came. By the time the spring of 1621 came, only about half of the passengers and crew were still alive.
ta phe ne wa to wa ka kan ni ti kwi we da no
In April, the Mayflower and her crew returned to England, leaving the Pilgrims to try and survive alone.
so phe la April ne ka bon ne ke su e kli ko lo no phe wa le o te ti thwa ne ke tu o te da tu ko wa o mu da tu ta da we lo tu ba khu kle di to tu ko mu ne tu khu kle tu ta lo awe ke we da su ti ko no ka bon ne.
They might all have died that year if it were not for the help they received from the Native Americans that lived in their area. One man in particular, named Squanto,
so phe ne no ke wa o do to wa ka ne ka ba ti lo ba mle ta o lo ba no bu ko ka li to wa sa ma we de twa ta ba so ro ka ba ti lo ba sa na ki ne ko le Squanto da le Squanto ne wa ta ga le ne chip te ta ba ak la wa ta ga ma no lo so Squanto ne master we de le da ko mi ko ka ba de wa ne pete we ni no
taught the English settlers many things that they needed to know. He taught them how to plant corn, how to fish, and how to live in their new home. He knew how to speak English and helped interpret for the settlers and the Wampanoag tribe so that they could speak to each other.
so when they go lo
That fall, there was a good harvest and plenty of food. The Pilgrims had a celebration that lasted for 3 days, and they invited their new friends, the Wampanoags, to celebrate with them.
wa ka lu le Native America ka lu phe ne we de ko le wa pa no no awe te ne Squanto we ne master we te la ka phonya di le ka tu da pla da di le lo ho ne ka ba mo hi di le lo ho ne le ki ne ani we ne we te ma ne ta o te pha lo ne ko lo le we te ma ne lo ne we te sim lu sip po ke da ma no da we te kwe we da ti to ko te pha do sa tho phe ne Thanksgiving ne he ke ro la no
This feast is often called the first Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed learning the story of the
Now, so that kind of name made a get color, bloody pretty the pa, shati shak of Lonnie, head get or head to lurk or America as so good. Now, so good, Blon in your way. Start to law that penny. And start to law that penny, Blon in a penny. What America bloody, no? So, bloody the pa, but I made her identity, no, I made an in the midam no de pale. No, bloody did what I made an enemy down no land in it, no? Nikiata seen winning where Sato a caragaro a move one in a plateau way. No penny yet a scene we can, no? So away they do to a yangi bonyani down land in it, no? Free will, that pata let at the blade, no? Falling away from grace, no? That he put letter at Takanyo. That no non in it. Tala ta khu than ni no ko me di le lo ni we ti pa lo we da a kle at nu ti pha no we ti stay we da le ta khet le khe si la ke tho ta ni kho plo ma ta ba ka sa yo ha ta a ko we ti stay we da no lo ni ta o pho ti pha ni he ke tho da ta phu ba ta phu ni ta ba thwe lo ta o we da de ta ba thwe lo ta phu ni we ti ba ma mle wa re lo mu lo ta ba he gi lo he ba lo ta ro de wa ma se lo ta hello da se to ko kha ho no asa ni thi kon ni ma amana we ti ma mnu le we ti thi kon ni de we da le tu ta ta ba lo ni ma amana ti ho ti ni we ti lo ba ta bu ta ba ta ta ble no lo ba ta bu ta ba ta ta ble le pa kripo ho me wala ta ke kripo ho me ni lo no so đó ở này bloody cripple thế phải đam mê ta so đó cái này bloody cripple thế phải là America này nó sát thọ ta này sát thọ ta phải là một cái qua hen nụ lọ tập phù chia hen nụ lọ lý phải này Roger William nó Roger William này ở qua cái với là qua đó khu mấy là cái Taylor Rhode Island phải này nó Roger William nó John Club Kiga nó rồi bao qua Roger William ở người bố sẽ the club of quality we get said Roger William ni when ni head head to Rhode Island whether who were taba ata tabli ko ni taba ata tabli go lenya ngane awe ke ram no le wa Anglican masale kini ni ke ro Puritan awe ha tho lo ekali akobe de katho hu ya tasitha no lamaga me flower head to ni de katho hu ya kisi awe head to ne de katho hu ya tasitha so awe head so ne di me flower di head to America ni no do awe o lo pha ta le sisi le ekali ta ho de no ba mnu le awe wa no ha tho ku yo no me le awe he hi ba ta ba ta tamli de awe the mo we da ti po ko po ta o po ta ma to po ta do ho ko de ka ba ho ni lo de ko myo ni ni le ko lo wa ko ni so ba pe da blo ho ni pe hu de ta o po awe de chai ba wa ni no awe de awe du o tho ba pe da ho to de phu le ko do de ta pe ta ya le ba pre do ni ba we le Rhode Island ni lo de awe ke ro wa bloody po to so po di ba sa ma to ko ta le da ko du o tho America bloody po to pha ta o po so ko to le ti ko pu ko ni lo ta ko ro I ba ta du o tho o phe Providence ta le Providence de we mi no mu ni mu to le ba sa to ti nya ni ba ta ti nya lo ti ba ta o po le Providence aywa ke po nya ni awe click lo ta do wa general or particular bloody po no General Baptist awe he we da ta to ta ble corporal General Baptist or particular Baptist ki pu ata de pha ni awe he ni de awe click lo we de awe du o tho we awe ti ta o po ya ke po nya so William ne we hi do po ta o po ta pi ta ma le Thomas O'Neill ni lo de te ka to ku ya lui si lui ni pe ni da lo le awe ti o ni ke tho lo kha ta ma no we lo ku kha le awe ti ta bu ta ba bo so ta le Roger William ni a ke we da wa ma da ta ku so si ko no ho wa a ni de se
What?
Who was Roger Williams? He was the son of a merchant tailor. His parents were Alice Pemberton and James Rogers. As a teen, he was a protege of the jurist Sir Edward Coke and was educated at Cambridge.
Una hua
Though he was ordained in the Church of England, his conversion to Puritanism while at Cambridge
awe ne le nya kha ne awe da le kli ta o pho lo ba sa ta na ke ne le khi ne awe so de le ta o mu su Puritan
led him to feel disillusioned with the church and its power in England.
Mam nu le awe ta cha we da ba e kli pho te de pha so ba te de pha ata noble le ta o pho pho ba ho ni
Years after he left his school at Cambridge, he was a chaplain for a wealthy family.
so ro awe ne me ba ku ba ku te de ga ba mle Cambridge ta jo ne tu na ho ba ta le Cambridge jo ne amino ka te lo le e kli kho ne no awe ha tho le jo phe ne ta so phe ne kha ne awe ba le ha tho le Cambridge jo ne awe de man ne la le ngwe ma ba mle jo le ami hu ta pla ho ne lo ne awe ne jo wi bla ho ne awe ke we da pa ku pa le aklo ase o te de pha pa ku lo da ne no chaplain si da ne pa le ka te di le amasa a he ba ba le aklo ase o te de pha so awe akani klo se do do
And on the 15th of December, 1629, he married Mary Bernard at the Church of High Laver, Essex, England. You may wonder about how he met his wife Mary Bernard. After being rejected by a woman he had chosen to marry, he became ill with fever and was nursed back to health by a woman named Mary Bernard, the daughter of the Reverend Richard Bernard of Nottinghamshire. The couple set sail.
So now I went in there. Gdele asoke mon bloni asoke blo ho ne ne pala akwa thwe o phomu ne we hi ke we da ho no top one
on board the Lion in December 1630, arriving in Boston, Massachusetts on February 5th, 1631. Roger
Kaba me to toku ya the si no the si third me ba no to toku ya the si ne we head to America blo ho ne we ole Boston pe
Roger Williams was warmly received as a godly minister, but word soon spread of his radical ideas, and he moved on to Plymouth, which was more hospitable than Boston to separatists. After
away ole Boston basa na ke ne le ki we tu lo su le mo ga Massachusetts ne ba le Massachusetts ba te pa he tu so ya pe ne le mo ga wa le do ka flower
only 2 years there, he accepted a call to a church in Salem in 1634. Williams was banished by the Massachusetts Bay by the civil authorities for his death.
So penny ne away gadele head to the Massachusetts penny ne Massachusetts pado ne away to do Roger William am no le away te we da la da opo so come on ne ba ora la da opo nya lo da opo so da opo ne ati kwe ka to da opo dai da lo da we ka ba ti lo da ba mi le pado ba he ma ni ba no ako ta ne pado ne pe yo
dangerous views. Besides those on land rights, he held that magistrates had no right to interfere in the matters of religion. Consequently, in January 1636, William set out for the Narragansett Bay, and in the spring, on land purchased from the Narragansett Indians, he founded the town of Providence.
So, Kabrola we daddy ne honene bano pagdele what to lo honene we who we at a lot of blonde a lot of we let you we go at the province, no?
And the colony of Rhode Island. Providence became a haven for Anabaptists, Quakers, and others whose beliefs
Penny Providence on any Rhode Island penny. Rhode Island penny Providence on any Bala Abudabara Akalulu, Mimula penny Quakers did a pa. Not bloody Akaru, oh, where I don't do love penny.
were denied public expression. Williams was briefly an Anabaptist, but in 1639 declared himself a seeker. He remained
So, under none in it, when in it, Lenya Khan in it gave an Anabaptist Akaru. No, Lenya England, the location in Gero Anabaptist, Basan in a penny on in it, away in it, huh? Wabuda Bara or Mumu Kulu Lobla in it, looking in it, where get our Huti Dinarapo, seekers, what they call it. No?
a steadfast believer in Calvinist theology.
Amle wa wete ti de pa ni ni awete mi wasuke na ngira ti de pa la portrait ma we Kelvin no lo mo ke John Kelvin awe ata na dasuta na ti pa ni awe lupo ma thwe we wa ti de pa la lupo ma thwe ta ti pa.
Williams went to England in 1643 to obtain a charter for Rhode Island, and again in 1651 through 54 to have it confirmed. During which visit, he became a friend to the poet John Milton. He was the first president of Rhode Island under its charter, and until his death always held some public
Awe ni ni akewe da pene Rhode Island apado ko degala ame padagai mo no padagai ni ni awe keto do ti do to ko William ni ni keto Roger ni ni keto do ti do ko padagai
office. He was of constant service to Rhode Island and neighboring colonies as a peacemaker with the Narragansett Indians, whose language he knew and whose trust he had earned. Although he helped defend Rhode Island against them during King Philip's War, 1675 through 76, he supported himself by farming and trading. A little about Roger Williams' family life.
So no pene lamo ga pado daga ni ni awe master we da wa o le ta lo to pene le awe akasada we atupla we no me da le da tu tha da le we man ni ti de pa ni we no lo we da le wa le o pene ti pa ho ni mo no ake we da wa khu daga ne le ta ko.
His firstborn was Mary. She was born in Plymouth, August 1633, and died in 1684. She married John Sayles and had 6 children. The next child was named Freeborn, born in Salem, Massachusetts Bay Colony on October 4th, 1635, and died in January 10th, 1710. She married Thomas Hart and had 4 children, and she had a second marriage to Walter Clark and had no children in that marriage. Providence was born, well, in Providence, September 1638, and died March 1686, and never married. Mercy was born in Providence July 15th, 1640. She first married a resolved waterman, and they had 5 children. Her husband then died in August 1670. After his death, she married Samuel Windsor, and together they had 3 children. Daniel was born in Providence February 1641, and married Rebecca Rhodes. They had 7 children. Joseph was born in Providence December 12, 1643, died August 17, 1724, and he married Lydia Olney. The life of this great man set an example of freedom.
Roger William ni awe apode pha o lu ga nya ya ali de pha o lu ga nya lo mo ga we ye to we a pu daga daga mi ya no
belief, the power of people's rights and liberty. This was a life
awe ne ne ami do ko ta me the le ta bu da ba ta ka ba me me ta ko ne ami do si ko le awe ne ne me pa daga le do a ra lo we da di ta ga so le me pa ko ga de ne ne o do a right a khwe a ya đi to lo tu to lo ta lo no awe ni ma we hu class we da di to ba ko ga de ko ra ta tab le le a khwe a ya ta khwe ta ya a pho ko mo no awe hu class we da a ko ni we mi hu we si ko
of Roger Williams.
awe ni Roger Williams ni awe ni me pa ta ga le a hu ge le ta bu ta ba ta ka pa ta ka ba le ho ko no ho ko di to ta tab le le ba ka no ni ta khwe da ya tu to awo ni si ko mi pa ga le a ge lo we de a ma we da no a ko ta ni awe ni mi mna le ta bu ta ba a ta ra lo ta ni awe a ko si ko lo no ma mle awe o le person de le tu lo to de lu ku kwa we da ta bu ta ba de ya ta tabli no awe ni America bloody ti de pa ata kho ti kho bu bo no ata kho ti kho bu sorry so America bloody po ti de pa ata ra lo ta on ni ata ra lo ta on ni lo mo ko open no ni ke open ka bli ba kho ni ke ya ta si nui ka ta ni awe te ata ra lo ta ni the ku America no de bi lo no ka ru si pho te pha ta o pho te pha da ka ru si pho te pha le ki te so ba so awe te pa pho ro da ma to ko da si ko lo ne ni ke ya ki kha pu ku ni kẻ thọ ta có đủ cái anh đồ cái tập phu là chỉ có phu nó American bloody crypto cái đó đi này nó để ở đây thì ta Sudan na đi được pa nó ta ma ta lỡ ở đây lúc bỏ mà thuê ở đây được pa này để điตัวbaครอบครัวเลยta cái kiaเลยมาna đi được pa hồ này nó ta lo so lo pa lo ta awe te de no ni akaru ni si lo was ka lo ba sa na ge ni awe te ma we da akaru atapi ta ma te de pha atapi ta ma te pha me da mu le ni lu o tho jo te de pha sekli te te de pha da ta ku ko so ko ro de pha do ko ro le ama we ma sa da te de pha ni lo de so do Kevin de no ni tu we da Kevin aywa ge po nya de no ni awe te po thwe we da primitive baptist bloody pha ata tu ta to ti pha no so đó lấy khi này ở đây tiêu ra là ha đa số ta này các bạn ở đó ta tập li blo này ở đây phe ở đây thì nhà ở tu lụt ti ở tôi này ta tập li ti pha này ở đây tu ở đó nó kết hợp ở đó ở đây ở bên đây là cái ru cái ti pha ru thế mà nó ta lại ở đây lụt bụi mà thuê ở đây mà thuê ở đây pha này lo nó so đó vô win bla lép là luôn mẹ